Members, I am now ready to receive motions for the chair. Mr. Jahari.
Yes, I'd like to nominate MP Sean Casey, please.
It has been moved by Mr. Jahari that Mr. Casey be elected as chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? It has been moved by Mr. Jahari that Mr. Casey be elected as chair of the committee pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, November 25th, 2021. I will now proceed to a recorded division, unless there is obvious consent. I declare the motion carried and Mr. Casey duly elected chair of the committee. Mr. Casey, I invite you to take the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk, and thank you to Mr. Jahari for moving my nomination and for the other committee members not insisting on a standing vote. I'll do my best to be impartial, efficient, and polite to one and all. So thank you so much. Now, Mr. Clerk, I believe that normally the next step is for, oh, you just sent me something. Okay. Is for the election of vice chairs. Okay, the notes that you just sent me say.
Yes, to Mr.
Welcome
Chair.
to meeting.
You've anticipated
Yep,
correctly. Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the vice chair must be a member of the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Luc Berthold for the vice chair position.
Thank you. Are there
any further motions after?
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Clerk. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. It has been moved by Mr. Ellis that Mr. Berthold be elected the first vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Seeing none, it being moved by Mr. Ellis that Mr. Berthold be elected the first vice chair of the committee, I will now proceed to a recorded division unless there is obvious consent. And pursuant, I declare the motion carried and Mr. Berthold duly elected first vice chair of the committee. Conformément à l'article 106.2.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the second vice chair must be a member of an opposition party other than the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the second vice chair. I would like to propose my friend Luc Thériault to the position of second vice chair.
Il est proposé par Mr.
Polovsky moves that Mr. Thériault be elected second vice chair of the committee. Pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, November 25th, 2021, I will proceed by recorded vote unless there is evident consent. The motion is adopted and Mr. Thériault is elected second vice chair of the committee.
Mr. Chair, we are in your hands.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Greffier.
Thank you very much, Clerk, for your excellent work and for sending me notes regarding the beginning of this session. So I will now read them. Welcome.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do the best we can to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether participating virtually or in person. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Given the ongoing pandemic situation and in light of the recommendations from public health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021 to remain healthy and safe, the following is recommended for those attending the meeting in person. First, anyone with symptoms should participate by Zoom and not attend the meeting in person. Second, everyone must maintain 2-meter physical distancing, whether seated or standing. Everyone must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room. It is recommended in the strongest possible terms that members wear their masks at all times, including when seated. Non-medical masks, which provide better clarity over cloth masks, are available in the room. Everyone present must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the hand sanitizer at the room entrance. Committee rooms are cleaned before and after each meeting. To maintain this, everyone is encouraged to clean surfaces such as the desk, chair, and microphone with the provided disinfectant wipes when vacating or taking a seat. As the chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I thank the members in advance for their cooperation, although I admit it will be challenging for me to enforce these measures from my basement in Charlottetown. Other business. I would now like to suggest as the next order of business that the committee now proceed to considering our routine motions. In preparing for this, the committee clerk has circulated a list of routine motions that the committee adopted in the last parliamentary session. The committee clerk can also answer any questions about the routine motions you may have. So if that is the will of the committee, I'm prepared to entertain the first routine motion.
Monsieur le Président.
Chair, I have a technical question for you. I know that you are very loud here. We can hear you very loud in the room. And I am listening to interpretation. And the sound in the room is so loud that I am having a lot of difficulty hearing the interpreter. So I would like to still be able to hear your lovely voice, but I would also like to be able to hear the interpretation. So if the sound could be equalized, that would be great. Thank you. Yes, this is a reasonable request. If I am part of the problem, maybe I could speak a little softer. Would that help?
Is it a little better when I'm speaking more softly?
C'est beaucoup mieux, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, it is a lot better. Thank you very much. But I may sound a little less enthusiastic, I suppose.
First routine motion.
Mr. Chair, if it would please the committee, I would read the routine motions.
Okay, Mr. Van Koeverden, go ahead.
Je vais alterner entre
I will switch between French and English. That the committee retain, as needed and at the discretion of the chair, the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist it in its work.
Motion, is there any discussion?
Rien.
Nothing?
None. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by, I guess by show of hands, I suppose, Mr. Clerk is probably the best way to go unless the recorded division is required.
Mr. Chair, unless it is unanimous or on division, it would be a recorded vote. But
all right.
Around the table, I'm seeing that it seems to be unanimous.
Yeah, so I'm not there, so I guess I'm going to rely on you to be my eyes to determine whether there is consensus in the room. So I declare the first motion adopted, and now we're ready for the second one.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much.
procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, the chair, 1 member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
You've heard the terms of the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, do we have consensus to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised that we have consensus. The motion is adopted. We're ready for the next one.
Le troisième,
Meeting without a quorum. That the chair be authorized to hold meetings, to receive evidence, and to have that evidence published when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition parties and 2 members of the government party. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
Mr. Van Couverden, you've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, do we have consensus to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised that there is consensus in the room. The motion is adopted. Mr. Van Couverden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 4th, time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses. That witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statement. That whenever possible, witnesses provide the committee with their opening statement 72 hours in advance. And at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows for the first round. The Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, the Bloc Québécois, New Democratic Party, and the second and subsequent round, the order and time for questioning be as follows. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. Bloc Québécois, 2 minutes and a half. New Democratic Party, 2.5 minutes. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes.
All right, you've heard the motion. Is there any discussion?
We have Mr. Davies and then Mr. Theriault.
Mr. Davies, please.
Thank you. Is it okay if I drop this while I speak into the mic? Is that protocol all right? Okay, thanks. Thank you. I had a small proposal to make to this. I noticed that the routine motions that have been circulated are not precisely the same as the routine motions that were adopted by the Health Committee in the first and last session of last Parliament. And there's a subtle difference here that I wanted to point out to my colleagues, and I'd like to make a suggestion. In the routine motions adopted by the Health Committee last Parliament, it said that witnesses be given up to, well, it said 10 minutes, the 5 minutes is okay, for their opening statement at the discretion of the chair. Then it went on to say that during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner, et cetera, and it went forward. So you can see that the qualifier of the discretion of the chair was over the witness's amount of time. If you look at the proposal before the committee today, that's been moved, and the discretion of the chair now is modifying the 6 minutes for each party. Now, I don't know if that was done on purpose, but I certainly don't think the chair should have the discretion to give 6 minutes or less as in the first order of questioning, or in fact, over the time. So I would propose that we either move that back, the words at the discretion of the chair, to where it should be, which is over the witness's amount of time, or just strike it completely, so that we know that witnesses are given up to 5 minutes, and then the questioners get up to 6 minutes in the first round, and then they get their 5 and 2.5, etc. I would point out that Where the discretion has been exercised is generally in the second round, where if witnesses go over or we have had a point of order or something, sometimes in the second round we don't have time for the full second time. So the chair would sometimes say, is it okay if each party gets 3 minutes or something? And then we would give that approval or not by unanimous consent. That always worked very well. And I believe that's the proper way to handle that issue, not to give the chair the discretion as to whether or not we get 6 minutes or 5 minutes, et cetera. So I hope I'm not terribly unclear, but that would be my suggestion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davies. So to determine exactly how to handle this, you've actually put forward a couple of suggestions. One is to completely delete the reference to the discretion of the chair, and the second is to move it. So we need to, we probably need to settle on one of those or entertain further discussion as to which way we should go, because unless we are going to proceed with this as a friendly amendment or by consensus, we're going to be left to vote on the amendment, which hopefully won't be necessary. But is there any further interventions on this particular point? Or Mr. Davies, would you like to indicate whether you're suggesting that the words be deleted or relocated?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I think I will proceed with proposing that the words be deleted so that we have certainty about how much time the witnesses have and how much time we have for questioning, and then we can operate by unanimous consent if we feel that we need to make changes. And of course, we can always revisit the routine motions as well and put it back in if we need to. So for clarification, I'll just propose we delete those words.
Okay, so I guess the two ways to proceed with this is first to go back to the mover, Mr. Van Couverden. Do you consider the amendment to be friendly? Because if so, we can just proceed as take it as is, and if not, then we'll actually need to vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Davies, for your intervention. You're correct. The articles, the routine motions are not identical as they were last time. I think we both experienced in the previous Parliament on various committees that given the time constraints involved with doing things semi-virtually or in a hybrid format, occasionally, you know, with delays with witnesses or with other members of this committee, that somebody was tasked with identifying how to move forward and use the time allotted and not go terribly over. So I think we can all agree that we have a friendly chair, and somebody's got to be given the discretion as to how to divide time when we have limited time. So I would ask that we, in good faith, keep the routine motions as such. And as you said, if we find that a grave miscarriage of justice by the chair has occurred, then we can come back and revisit them at another time. But I think that appealing to the chair's good judgment in cases where he does have to make a call, it would be prudent.
Okay, so the discussion now then is on the amendment. Is there any further interventions with respect to the amendment suggested by Mr. Davies to delete the words at the discretion of the chair?
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Thériault, unless I misunderstood, I believe I understood Mr. Davies to have said that witnesses would have 7 minutes and to ensure that the parties do have sufficient time to put their questions. He was asking that we remove the phrase at the discretion of the chair. I understood that the time given to witnesses would go from 5 to 7 minutes. In my opinion, when we are undertaking a study, we do need to give witnesses sufficient time for them to tell us what they have come to say. When we have people travel, it is good to give them at least enough time for them to say what they have to say. So I think it would be better to have 7 rather than 5 minutes for witnesses. And indeed to keep the 6 minutes for first round questions. Thank you, Mr. Thériault. What you have actually done is propose a second amendment. This would be a second amendment, so we need to decide, first of all, whether to pass Mr. Davies' amendment, after which we can discuss your suggestion, which would also be an amendment, in fact, to extend the time given to witnesses. We are now debating the amendment moved by Mr. Davies, which are to delete the words "at the discretion of the chair."
Any further interventions on Mr. Davies' amendment? Okay, so we are then ready for the question. Do we have consensus? Well, obviously we don't, because it wasn't friendly. So I believe that this requires a standing vote as to whether the words "at the discretion of the chair" be removed from the routine motions. Mr. Clerk, could you conduct a standing vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm just think Mr. Pawlowski wanted to make a comment first.
Dr. Pawlowski, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say my understanding was that the whips from all parties agreed on the present wording, and so that's why we're going with it.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Okay, is there any further interventions with respect to the amendment? If not, Mr. Clerk, if you could conduct a vote,
yes.
please.
Well, my colleague referred to a different point. The whips may have agreed, but these committees, our committees, are masters of our own procedure, and it is extremely common for committees to shape the routine motions in ways that deviate from that, as we've done in many occasions. So that may be, if you want to conform to what the whips want, that's certainly an argument, but I don't want anybody at this table to think that just because the whips agree doesn't mean that we can't modify our motions if we see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Any further discussion? Are we ready for the question? Okay. You're on, Mr. Clerk.
I would just seek guidance on whether the committee would like a recorded division or to have it on division.
I think recorded division.
Recorded division has been requested by Mr. Davies. On the amendment of Mr. Davies, Mr. Hanley. Nay. Mr. Johari.
Nay.
Mr. Pawlowski.
No.
Ms. Sidhu. Mr. Vancouverden.
Nay.
Mr. Morrison.
No.
Mr. Ellis.
Yes.
Ms. Cramp-Nyman.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Monsieur Thériault.
Oui.
Mr. Davies.
We.
Mr. Chair, nays 6, yeas 5.
I declare the amendment defeated. Monsieur Thériault avait un sujet.
Mr. Thériault had a suggestion for a second amendment. Would you kindly present it? If I understood correctly, you would move an amendment that would extend the speaking time for witnesses for up to 7 minutes. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct, Mr. Chairman.
And suggested amendment to allow 7 minutes for opening remarks from witnesses. Is there any discussion on this amendment?
Mr. Davies would like to intervene.
Mr. Davies?
Yes, well, I'd like to thank my colleague for the amendment. I have a considerable sympathy for this. Our routine motions last Parliament allowed for up to 10 minutes per witness. So it's kind of complicated. Then we adopted a special motion of the House that was moved by Ms. Rumpel-Garner that sent some special rules governing how we handled COVID, which basically was in force for most of last Parliament. And in that motion, we had 4 witnesses per hour, so it made 10 minutes unworkable because that would have been 40 minutes of the 60. So we were routinely cutting that down. I think the normal course of events is usually 2 witnesses per hour, which is the normal situation. I think that's actually better because when you have 2 witnesses here, and of course each witness can have 2 representatives, that could be 4 people sitting here, but it allows you to actually, I think, pay proper tribute to those witnesses and actually give every member a chance to question them. So the other thing I was going to mention is sometimes this committee can have some pretty high-powered people that are highly skilled. We have epidemiologists and immunologists and experts, and I've had sympathy with asking them, as Mr. Thériault said, to come here sometimes in person and give us the benefit of their wisdom for 5 minutes. It takes me 5 minutes to clear my throat sometimes. So usually I think having more time makes sense. However, in this case, I'm going to suggest, I'm going to not support this for the following reason. If you look at the way that the time has been allocated, it's pretty elegantly done. If we have 5 minutes per witness and there's 2 witnesses, that's 10 minutes gone. Then the first round is 4 rounds of 6 minutes each, so that's 24 minutes. That takes us to 34 minutes. And then in the second round, the Conservatives have 5, Liberals 5, 2.5, 2.5, that's another 5, Conservative 5, Liberal 5, for a further 25 minutes to finish the second round. If you add that up, it's 59 minutes. Now, it rarely goes as smoothly as that, but in theory, if we start on time and we hold everybody to their time, then with the 2 5 minutes, we have a chance for everybody to get through the first and second rounds. And I think we should aspire to that. But I would say to Mr. Thériault that, like with the previous routine motion that we just debated, if we find that the 5 minutes is not sufficient, then I think that we can always revisit our routine motions in March or April, or if we want, and see how that's working. But I think that the final thing I'll say is, as much as I want to hear from the witnesses for their 5 minutes, I do think that a good witness can get to the nub of the matter in 5 minutes. The real benefit of this committee is in our questioning. And that's, I think, to maximize the ability of more members of this committee to ask questions that their constituents want asked, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Any further interventions on the amendment?
I believe Mr. Pawlowski and then Mr. Thériault.
Dr. Pawlowski, please.
I'm somewhat agnostic on most of these motions, but on this particular one, I feel inclined to support it because I think we have some excellent witnesses. What we're dealing with on this committee is often fairly technical subject matter, and sometimes it takes people time in order to explain the issues and make their arguments. Although I do greatly appreciate the fact that we want to have the opportunity to ask questions that our constituents might be interested in, those may not at times be, at least according to the witness, the most important topics that he or she may want to talk about. So I think giving people an opportunity to fully kind of explain their perception of a problem and how they should deal with it is important, and we ought to give them the time. So I feel inclined to support the motion.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. Mr. Thériault, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, c'est à moi.
What I wanted to add was this. We often receive organizations, and I think that an organization could be given 10 minutes rather than have everybody who accompanies the main witness speak. In some cases, we think we're gaining time, but when a witness does not cover everything in his or her testimony, we need to use our questions to make them be specific about what they might have said in the first place. So we've been through the first, second, third, and fourth wave at the Health Committee. Some who have been through all that have had a crash course, if not a PhD in public health and epidemiology. And of course, Zoom is a factor. But when people are invited to come all the way here to speak to us for 5 minutes, then it is difficult to get people to come here. If there are 4 people here for a given organization, they could take 5 minutes each, but if they're not, then it would be useful to have them for 7 minutes and not 5. I would invite committee members, since we now have guarantee of the discretion of the chair, we can always make any adjustments needed as we go.
Mr. Chair, I have Ms. Kramp-Nyman, then Mr. Van Koeverden.
Okay, Ms. Kramp-Nyman, please.
Hi there. I understand the looking for longer than 5 minutes, but that being said, recognizing that this committee, it's very technical, but it's also very compassionate. I think, though, that if indeed there is a situation where people want more than 5 minutes or need more than 5 minutes, it is the will of the chair to ask for consent around the committee. So there is some flexibility that could be granted. I think as a baseline, 7 minutes is a window, but I think 5 is fine in this case.
Thank you. Mr. Van Koeverden?
Thank you. I tend to agree with the previous statement, and that I'd also just say that if we truly want more time for our witnesses, and I think we can all agree with that, then we can also all mutually agree to try to keep our questions short, because we've all been in meetings before where the question takes up more than half of the allotted time. So if we truly do want to hear from our witnesses, I think that's an accommodation that we can all sort of in good faith agree to. And I agree that 5 minutes is enough, and that our chair is compassionate and will not necessarily cut people off, but it's almost never the case that we get through that 59-minute period in a 60-minute stretch.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Any further interventions on the amendment?
Mr. Ellison, then Mr. Davies, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Dr. Ellis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the other things to keep in mind is, of course, subject matter experts often like to wax on about their particular expertise. And given that, I think really what we want to get at here is the questions that we want answered, not necessarily to hear what their expertise is in their mind. So I guess I would caution to continue just to willy-nilly add time to their speaking time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Well, I just wanted to add the point as well that I think we always invite people to submit written briefs as well. So there's never any limitation on their written brief. So as long as we're clear with them to submit everything they want in writing, but really the 5 minutes is a chance for them to sort of hit the highlights and get to the point so that we can ask them questions. But they can submit very, very lengthy written briefs if they want.
Any further discussion?
No more speakers on my list, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, can we deal with this motion on division, or would someone like to request a standing division? Mr. Clerk, in the room, can you discern whether we're good to go with or whether a standing vote's required?
It seems that we will require a recorded vote, as I'm not getting the sense we have unanimous consent or desire for on division.
We need someone to ask for it, please.
It's requested by Ms. Cramp-Nyman.
Okay, please proceed, Mr. Clerk.
So on the amendment of Mr. Thériault, Mr. Hanley.
I vote against.
Nay. Mr. Jahari.
Vote against.
Nay. Mr. Pawlowski.
Pour.
In favor, Ms. Sadhu.
Nay.
Nay. Mr. Van Couverden.
Je vote contre.
Nay.
Mr. Morrison.
No.
Mr. Ellis.
No.
Ms. Cramp-Nyman.
No.
Mr. Williams.
Nay.
Mr. Thériault.
Oui.
4.
Mr. Chair, 9 nay, 2 yay.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I declare the amendment defeated. We are now on to the main motion as originally presented. Is there any discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, do we have consensus in the room to adopt the motion? We do. The clerk advises me that there is consensus. Thank you. The motion is passed, and we're on to the next one. Mr. Van Couverden, please.
Merci, Monsieur Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before continuing, can you hear me even if I have my mask? Yes, excellent. So the fifth distribution of document, that only the clerk of the document be allowed to distribute documents to the members of the committee. These documents must be in both official languages, and all witnesses must be informed of this in advance.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there a consensus in the room to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised that there is consensus in the room. The motion is adopted. Mr. Van Couverden.
Sixth, my favorite, working meals. That the clerk of the committee, at the discretion of the chair, be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there consensus in the room to adopt the motion as presented? Everyone's okay with my discretion on this one?
And we're hungry.
PEI potatoes, exclusively PEI potatoes.
Hear,
Potatoes
hear.
again, Mr. Chair?
All right, I declare the motion adopted. Mr. Van Couverton.
Merci.
Thank you. It's the 7th now. Travel accommodation and living expenses of witnesses. That, if requested, reasonable travel accommodation and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses, not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, and that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, do we have consensus of the meeting to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised that there's consensus in the room. Mr. Van Couverton.
Access to in-camera meetings. That, unless otherwise ordered, each committee member will be allowed to be accompanied by 1 staff member at in-camera meetings, and that 1 additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, do we have consensus in the room to adopt the motion as presented? I think I see. Okay, we got a thumbs up. It appears that there is consensus in the room. I am so advised. I declare the motion adopted. Mr. Van Couverton.
Transcripts of in-camera meetings. That 1 copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff, and that the analysts assigned to the committee also have access to the in-camera transcripts.
You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, do we have consensus to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised that there is consensus in the room. The motion is adopted. Mr. Van Couverton.
Notice of motion that a 48-hour notice interpreted as 2 nights be required for any substantive motion to be moved in committee unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that A, the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, and B, the motion be distributed to members and the offices of the whips of each recognized party in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted if it was received no later than the deadline hour. And C, notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is holding meetings outside the parliamentary precinct, no substantive motion may be moved.
You've heard the terms of the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Davies would like to intervene.
Mr. Davies, please.
Yeah, just more of a question and an observation. What's different in this language from last time, and in fact, I think every notice of motion or routine motion on this I've seen, is the obligation of the clerk to distribute the motion to the offices of the whips. And I just don't know why that is the case. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. But the Rucci motions last time did not have that language. And other than the whips wanting to stick their nose into everybody's business all the time, I mean, I kind of understand why they want it. They just want to know. And I'm not sure there's any harm in the clerk distributing it, but I just thought I would, for transparency, share that with my colleagues that this does appear to be new. And you know, if anybody had any thoughts about it, I would entertain them.
Anybody have any thoughts or anything else they wish to contribute with respect to this motion?
I don't see any other members that wish to make further interventions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Davies, you have us stumped. Do we have consensus in the room to adopt the motion as presented? I believe I'm advised that we do have consensus. The motion is therefore adopted. Mr. Van Koeverden.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will ask for your patience for the next motion. It is quite long. So, orders of reference from the House respecting bills. That, in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee in both official languages any amendments to the bill which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest that the committee consider. B. Suggested amendments filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of a clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill. And C. During the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make brief representations in support of them.
You have heard the terms of the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, do we have consensus to adopt the motion? I'm advised that there's consensus in the room. The motion is therefore adopted. Mr. Van Koeverden.
Technical tests for witnesses, that the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration Support Team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advise the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical tests.
You've heard the terms of the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is it the will of the committee to adopt the motion as presented? There's consensus in the room. I declare the motion adopted. Is there any further business to come before the meeting?
Il y a une autre, je pense.
Yes, there is another motion.
Davies on my speaking list, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Van Gooverden.
Sorry, I was just indicating there was one more routine motion.
And do you wish to move it?
Sure, if you wish. Revision linguistique.
Linguistic review. That all documents submitted for committee business that do not come from a federal department, members' offices, or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau be sent for prior linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to members.
You've heard the terms of the motion. Is there any discussion? Mr. Davies, do you wish to intervene on this?
No, Mr. Chair, I had some other business I wanted to bring to the committee.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, do we have consensus to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised there's consensus in the room. Any further business to come before the meeting?
I have Mr. Davies and then Mr. Hanley, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I
Mr.
had.
Davies?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I had three other routine motions I wanted to propose for the committee's consideration. I'll move them one at a time. The first one is something that has really been in all routine motions that I've seen, and that is, and I do have copies in English and French. I'll just read it out and then I'll pass it out. That all requests to appear before the committee be distributed to the committee members. And perhaps I can, if I could speak to that briefly. So we all know that occasionally, in fact frequently, there's witnesses that write to the chair and they request that they want to appear before the committee. All this motion would do is that the clerk would notify the members that those requests have been made. It's kind of a courtesy to the members so that we know who's wanting to appear before the committee. It can sometimes influence who we call as witnesses. Let's say we're going to embark on a study and a number of groups contact the clerk and say they'd like to appear. If that's circulated to us all, we can incorporate that into our own requests for witnesses. So I would hope that this is non-controversial. It has been part of the Health Committee's routine motions before, and my understanding is many other committees as well.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. The motion's in order. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, is it the will of the committee to adopt the motion as presented?
I suppose I have a question, just for clarity. Is there any reason to believe that that could slow the process down? And does the clerk then distribute that info to us? Or does somebody else distribute it?
Mr. Davies, do you want to respond to that?
I defer to the clerk, but the way it's worked in the past is because the requests go to the clerk just sends an email just saying a request has been made by such and such a witness. I don't believe there's been any slowing down of any process, and that's all we get is just notification.
Okay. So it's just an email. There's no vote or anything like that.
No,
we're just being notified.
Yeah.
It would be helpful for me, just for clarity, whether you wish just simply the information that the request was received and by whom to be distributed, or if you wish the full request to be translated and distributed as it was received.
I would just suggest whatever's easiest and quickest. I mean, the point of this routine motion is just that we're all kept abreast on who wants to appear before the committee. So whatever would be easiest. And I would just perhaps suggest maybe you consult with the clerk from last Health Committee and ask how they did it. But usually it was just an email that just said, you know, the BC Nurses Association is requested to appear on this study. Usually something very simple.
I think regarding translation, it would be fastest and most efficient to simply distribute information of who made the request, what study it pertains to, and when it was received. And it seems like everyone's in agreement with that understanding. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think we can move forward that way.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Do we have consensus in the room to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised that there's consensus in the room. The motion is adopted. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next one I think is similarly uncontroversial, and it's as well another routine motion that has been adopted by many committees, and it would read, and I'll have my staff pass that around too, that whenever a minister appears before the committee, every effort be made to ensure that the meeting is televised. It's pretty standard fare. It doesn't require it to be. As you can tell by the language, it just indicates that every effort be made. It's usually something I think that all sides want to be done anyway. And when a minister appears before a committee, it's usually very important. And but when you have it in the routine motions, as has been the case before, it just indicates to the clerk, in terms of booking rooms, they know to book a room that has the capacity to be televised, etc. So that's the purpose of this. And again, I'm surprised that it wasn't in the routine motions by the whips. I'm going to guess that it was just missed as opposed to a deliberate issue, because it's really been standard in all routine motions that I've seen in committees for many years.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. Do we have consensus to adopt the motion as presented? I'm advised there's consensus in the room. The motion is adopted. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last one, and my final proposal, I will pass it around, but I will read this one into the record as well. Thank you. You members will have seen that we've passed a couple of routine motions that have to do with going in camera, but there is no motion that specifies when it is appropriate to go in camera. What I've done is I've retabled a routine motion that was passed by this committee last Parliament. And this was actually taken from another committee that had been chaired by a former colleague of mine. I understand, I think some 8 committees had language similar to this in their routine motions last Parliament, and I'll read it as such. That the committee may meet in camera only for the following purposes. A, to consider a draft report. B, to attend briefings concerning national security. C, to consider lists of witnesses. D, for any other reason with the unanimous consent of the committee. It goes on to say that all votes taken in camera, with the exception of votes regarding the consideration of draft reports, be recorded in the minutes of proceedings, including how each member voted when recorded votes are requested, that any motion to sit in camera is debatable and amendable. If I may speak just briefly to it, Mr. Clerk, I think, or Mr. Clerk, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I think one of the most hopeful statements I heard our current Prime Minister say when he first took office was that he wanted to lead a government that was open by default. And I think he's right about that. And I think it's, as parliamentarians, the people's business should be by definition, and it should be by default open. We have, I think, all seen, at least those of us who have been in other parliaments, seen that sometimes parties, sometimes governments, want to go in camera a little too earnestly, and they dive into camera to basically shield debate from the public that there's no real reason for it not to be before the public, but because they prefer it to be in secret. And I think it's really important that we be seen as parliamentarians to be conducting the people's business in public. Now, having said that, there are obviously situations where it's appropriate to go in camera, and the situations that have been designated here are the ones that I think everybody agrees that if there's a situation that's been missed, I'd be happy to entertain an amendment. But generally, when we're considering a draft report, that is in camera because we want to be free to haggle over wording and paragraphs, and we want people to be able to speak their minds. And as well, reports deal with witnesses' evidence. And so sometimes if we're critiquing a witness's evidence, out of respect for the witness, we want to do that in camera. We don't want to be looking like we're being disrespectful to their evidence. Second, obviously, national security is very broad, and that would be something I think we'd all agree should be done in camera. To consider lists of witnesses is also another thing that we do, where we don't want it to look like, we don't want to be politically grandstanding on witnesses, but we want to have a fulsome discussion about who would be good witnesses before the committee. And the last part, I think, is the most important one for me, which is the list is not exhaustive. It's for any other reason that the committee may determine to be legitimate, but it would require unanimous consent. So when we all agree that it's appropriate to not conduct our business in public, then we can leave that open for the committee to determine. In terms of votes, I think, except for, as we say, votes that are regarding consideration of draft reports, every other vote in Parliament is conducted publicly. I think our constituents deserve to know where we stand on issues, and it's only in committee where there's this perverse ability to dive into secrecy and vote in a way that nobody knows how you voted. And I don't think that's right. There are certain cases where it's appropriate, and that's why there's provision made for it in certain cases. Where I'll conclude is by saying the reason I'd like this in our routine motions as opposed to leaving it out is, again, the presumption should be we conduct our business in public, and we narrowly define when we don't, not the other way around. If we don't adopt this, then that means that we'll go in camera whenever we want to by majority vote, and I think that's putting the cart before the horse. So I think that because this has been done before by our committee, it worked very well, by the way. I don't think we ever had a problem with it. I would say that this is a good chance for us all as committee members to make a statement to the public that we believe in conducting our business in public, except in very narrowly circumscribed circumstances where going in camera is appropriate. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. During your remarks, I received an email from the clerk to indicate some procedural concerns. I'm going to suspend to take advice from the clerk and be back to you and reconvene the meeting in 3 minutes to rule on the admissibility of the motion. So we stand suspended. All right, colleagues, thank you for that indulgence. I've had the opportunity to be advised by the clerk with respect to the admissibility of this motion, and I rule the motion as out of order by virtue of it not being in compliance with the standing orders. In particular, the standing orders consider a motion to go in public or in camera to be a non-debatable motion under Standing Order 67 sub 1 and 67 sub 2. And this is outlined in Procedure and Practice, Chapter 20 at page 1089, where it says, and I quote, "Any member may move a motion to go from sitting in public to sitting in camera and vice versa. The motion is decided immediately without debate or amendment. In practice, committees often change from one to the other at the suggestion of the chair with the implied consent of the members." So with that, is there any further business to come before the meeting?
Mr. Davies has an intervention.
Yes, Mr. Davies?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for that ruling. I would move another routine motion identical to the one I just did, but with the words that any motion to sit in camera is debatable, amendable, deleted. So the exact same motion, but I'll take out the part that caused you to rule it out of order.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Mr. Clerk, do we need to huddle, or can I consider the motion to be in order?
I don't have any further advice, and I think your conclusion is correct.
Very well then, I declare the motion to be in order and now open for discussion. Is there any interventions on the motion?
I do not see any.
Very well. I take it we are ready for the question. Do we have consensus in the room with respect to this motion? If not, would someone please ask for a standing division?
Mr. Chair, may I have a recorded vote, please?
You most certainly may. Mr. Clerk, could you look after that?
On the motion of Mr. Davies regarding meeting in camera, Mr. Hanley.
I vote against.
Mr. Jahari.
I vote against.
Mr. Pulowski.
Against.
Ms. Sidhu.
Against.
Mr. Vancouverden.
Je vote contre.
Mr. Morrison.
Against.
Mr. Ellis.
Against.
Ms. Cramp-Nyman.
Against.
Mr. Williams.
Nay.
Mr. Thériault.
Pour.
Mr. Davies.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, yeas 2, nays 9.
I declare the motion defeated. Is there any further business to come before the meeting?
Mr. Vancouverden has an intervention.
Mr. Vancouverden.
Well, first, I'd like to thank everybody in the meeting for helping us get through the sort of humdrum stuff in the first meetings. It's always sort of routine, but I thank everybody for kind of playing along and everything, and thank the chair and congratulate the chair for his election. And I would just like to say that I think in the spirit of where we are currently at in Canada and around the world in the state of a global health emergency, what an extraordinary obligation we all have to work together to improve the situation in Canada, get the answers that Canadians deserve, and collaborate in an ultimately, in a spirit of collaboration and that ideal of coming together on this committee, I don't think should be lost. And in that regard, I also want to acknowledge that this has been a long month of sitting. It's kind of rare that we sit 4 weeks in a row. So we have an opportunity to go home now and see our families and our constituents and our stakeholders and everything, that we not lose sight of the work ahead in this committee. But I think what the next step could be, if we all agree, is for the first meeting back to, when we reconstitute, to have a briefing from officials, not necessarily any specific official, but in the context of the pandemic, wherever we are, when we do reconvene, that the first meeting be one with officials, so that we can start off with a question and answer period and a statement from those officials, just for the sake of conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Van Koeverden. Any further interventions?
Mr. Chair, Steve Ellis.
Go ahead, Dr. Ellis.
Just wondering, do we have a list of who the members think of inviting? And certainly would like to suggest the Minister of Health be here.
It's totally at the will of the committee, and the minister is at our disposal, certainly. I don't think it should be limited to the minister. And in the past, we have had, this committee has had Dr. Tam join us as well. And so it should not be limited to any NPHAC, members of the Public Health Agency, Health Canada. The list is long of officials. I just got briefed by the ministry last week, and there's 5 different agencies, which are all of relevance to this committee, so should not exclude anyone.
And I'm happy to take the responsibility of coordinating with the vice chairs and with Mr. Davies to determine exactly who people want and make sure that we hit the ground running first of the new year if everyone's comfortable with that.
Mr. Davies would like to intervene.
Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think that's a wise way to proceed. Just for clarity, I think we should, though, at this meeting, have an idea of, to me, for sure we should invite the minister and Dr. Tam. Beyond that, I think we can work it out, but I think we should be on that page. The other thing I was going to mention is what was in my mind, and maybe we can do this on the Wednesday, the second meeting, is that meeting be a subcommittee meeting, and what each party, because each party is represented on the subcommittee, at that second meeting, we come to that meeting with some ideas of how we're going to be proceeding in terms of studies. I had in my mind thought that should be the first meeting, so I'm okay with reversing that as well, like having the first meeting back being a subcommittee meeting, and then having the minister and Dr. Tam come on the Wednesday. But I'm happy if Mr. Van Koeverden wants to be Monday for the minister, that's fine with me. But I just think one of those meetings that week should be a subcommittee so that we can start organizing our work for the new year.
Just before you go, Marcus.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and it might what we decide will be impacted by the availability of the minister and Dr. Tam and whoever else we decide on. But if we agree that the first 2 meetings will be a briefing and a planning session, and then we can take it from there.
And I think I could also add, as the representative on the subcommittee, that I would be flexible as well. And if there's a lack of availability on a Monday, for example, due to travel or some unforeseen circumstance, then we could always have that meeting first. But I do think that if you want to bring business to the meeting, to the subcommittee meeting, in terms of studies and ideas, then they should be informed by first having a meeting with the officials and potentially the minister as well. So, but I would also be fine with reversing them if that's the preference.
If I could just respond quickly, then I'll get out of the way. I kind of like the idea of having the flexibility, because my experience with ministers is that they're very busy, and if you go with one day for a minister, chances are they can't make it. If we allow the chair to have the flexibility of saying 2 different dates, with great respect, I don't know that I bet you every person in this room has got at least 3 ideas for studies right now. I don't think anything that we hear on the Monday is going to significantly change that. So, so that's why I think the flexibility is better than not.
Mr. Chair, I have Mr. Pulaski, then Mr. Ellis.
I'd suggest at the meeting we also ask for the head of NACI, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, and the deputy minister. And I think in their first address, I imagine they will, whether we ask them to or not, but given us an assessment of our present situation with relation to COVID.
Thank you. Dr. Ellis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the other consideration, of course, is there's not a lot of flexibility to add meetings, and I would suggest we need the committee meeting first. I think the other thing is we need to address the Auditor General's report that's recently come out also. So I would suggest a regular committee before the subcommittee meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Any further interventions? Anything else to come before the meeting? If not, just let me say thank you. This is. I think we're off to a good start. We have a lot before us, but we clearly have an engaged group that seems to have their eye on the ball. So I'm proud to be in the chair and to be part of this, and we'll do my darndest to make sure that our time is used efficiently right from the hop. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoy your time with your family and the ones you love over the next few weeks, and that we come back all set to do good things for Canadians. Is it the will of the meeting that we adjourn? Thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, everyone. We're adjourned.